For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. There's an old saying in sports and in life that says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You don't mess up a winning formula, and you don't change a winning strategy. As an example, let's say you're a pitcher for a baseball team, and you know that the team you're playing against struggles with fastballs up and in. You keep throwing them fastballs up and in, and for the most part, you're getting strikeouts and weak groundouts. Why the heck would you change it up? Until they show you that they can hit it and get to you, keep doing what you're doing. It's a perfectly valid strategy and a perfectly fine way to win games. Or, in a non-sporting example, let's say that you're playing Wordle, and you always start out with the same word, and you're constantly winning and building a streak, and you're getting the correct word in 3 or 4 tries. There's no reason to switch up the starting word if you're happy with your performance and you've got a good streak going. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, this team that you've been watching this entire time is the 1972 Atlanta Falcons, and during one particular game, they had a strategy that worked to perfection, which, as you could probably tell from the highlights, had to do with running the ball a lot. And I mean a lot. And the opposition? Well, they had a problem with it. Not because they were frustrated with themselves for not being able to stop it, but because they thought the Falcons were a bad team for attempting to win the game. Seriously. Apparently, sticking with the winning formula means you're a bad team. That's legitimately what the Los Angeles Rams thought after their 1972 meeting against the Falcons. And let's just say that when you're making Falcons head coach Norm Van Brocklin look sane and rational and logical, you're on the wrong side of history. Because this is the story behind one of the dumbest controversies of the entire 1972 NFL season. Before I talk about the actual incident in question and why it was so stupid, we need some context to understand the importance of the game at hand and how the Falcons were playing up until that point. It's October 1st, 1972. It's week 3 of the NFL season, and we've got a battle in the NFC West down in Atlanta between the Atlanta Falcons and the Los Angeles Rams. The stakes for this early season matchup are simple. For the Rams, they enter at 1-0-1 as one of just 3 teams in the conference, alongside Dallas and Washington, to not lose a game yet. And for the Falcons, they enter at 1-1, following a shocking loss to the New England Patriots the week before, where they had the game-winning field goal attempt from 10 yards out and somehow shanked it. And I don't mean that their kicker shanked it from the 10-yard line. I mean that because the goalposts were at the front of the end zone back in 1972 instead of the back. It was literally a 10-yard kick. So imagine a kick today from the 1-yard line, and now imagine a kick half as long. And imagine a professional kicker just missing that. If he made that kick, the Falcons would be 2-0. But regardless, the winner of this game assumes first place in the NFC West, which is always a good spot to be in. And the Falcons looked like a pretty solid team to start off the 1972 season entering this game. After a 1971 season, where they finished 7-6-1 and had their best record in franchise history, with their only winning record in team history at the time, they were picking up right where they left off, and through the first 2 games of the season, had scored 57 points, or 28.5 points per game. This was the best total in the NFC, and the second best total in the entire NFL, only behind the New York Jets, who had somehow scored 85 points across their first 2 games, blowing past the rest of the league in every offensive metric early on. So, how were the Falcons good on offense through their first 2 games? Simple. An effective ground game. Because the Falcons love to run the football, and they ran it very well. Through their first 2 games, the Falcons had 355 rushing yards, which was the 5th most in the league, and they did it while averaging 4.6 yards per carry, which was the 6th most in the league. Atlanta had one of the most efficient running games in football to start off the 1972 campaign. They had 173 yards rushing in their 37-21 win against the Chicago Bears during the opening week of the season. And they followed that up with 182 yards rushing in their loss to the New England Patriots the following week, with both Dave Hampton and Art Malone running for 70-plus yards. After 2 games, the Falcons had 2 of the top 15 rushers in football from a rushing yardage standpoint, making them one of just 3 teams, alongside the Miami Dolphins and the Chicago Bears, to have 2 guys inside the top 15. They love giving the rock to Malone, and love giving the rock to Hampton, and that was how they were going to win their games. So when it came to this game against the Los Angeles Rams, the strategy seemed to be, understandably, to run the football. Now, as you can tell from these highlights, let me make it very clear. The Falcons absolutely dominated this game. This was not even remotely close, and you can make a legitimate argument that, at the time, this was the greatest team performance in the history of the Falcons, and would remain that way until their demolition during the opening week against the New Orleans Saints 1 week later in 1973. When the final gun went off, the Falcons were victorious, taking it by a final score of 31-3, having led 17-0 at the half and never looking back. The Falcons' defense was dominant, forcing 6 turnovers and getting 4 sacks. Pete Beathard started the game under center for the Rams, and he was atrocious, going 5 for 14, completing 35% of his passes with no touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a passer rating of 19.9, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. And when the late great Roman Gabriel came off the bench to try and right the ship for the Rams, he was no better, going 5 for 18, completing 27% of his passes with no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a passer rating of 5.8, which is also worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. The Rams were actually one of the few teams entering the week that had a better ground game than the Falcons, but you couldn't tell it on this day, as Willie Ellison, the 1,000-yard Pro Bowl running back a year ago in 1971, was held to just 40 yards rushing. Everything that could have gone right for the Falcons on this day did, and head coach Norm Van Brocklin flat out said after the game that it was the best game that the team played under his watch, and maybe the best game that the team played in franchise history by default. However, the main reason why they won this game? Well, as you could probably guess and as you're about to tell, it had to do with their amazing ground game, because the Atlanta Falcons finished this game completing just 2 passes, but still putting up 31 points, because they ran for 297 yards. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why throw the ball when running the clock works so well and churns the clock? The 297 yards set a team record for the most rushing yards in a game, and was a record that would not be broken for 34 years, as the next time any Falcon team would run for that many yards was on September 17th, 2006, when the Falcons ran for 306 yards in a 14-3 win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as in, a team that did not exist at the time of this game. Dave Hampton ran for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Art Malone ran for 103 yards, giving the Falcons multiple running backs that went over 100 yards. And to illustrate how well it was working, the Falcons averaged a whopping 5.8 yards per carry on the ground, meaning that, on average, it took them 2 runs to get a first down. Atlanta called 61 plays on offense during the game, and 51 of those plays were runs, meaning that 84% of the plays that Atlanta called involved one of their players running with the football, a staggeringly high percentage. But obviously, it worked out for them. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Keep pounding the rock and getting those yards and dominating at the line of scrimmage. And in a normal world, that'd be the end of the story, because of course it would be. Team runs the ball, team wins the game running the ball, and that's the end of it. But the Los Angeles Rams took issue with this, because in the eyes of the Rams, the Falcons running the ball a lot and having success while doing so meant that they weren't a good team. Seriously. And it wasn't some no-name or their head coach saying that. It was one of the greatest players in the history of the sport saying that. The starting left guard for the Los Angeles Rams was a man named Tom Mack, and he's one of the greatest offensive linemen in NFL history. By the time his career was over, he made it to 11 Pro Bowls. He received 3 AP Second Team All-Pro nominations, including one during that 1972 campaign, and he got inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1999. In other words, this was no slouch. This was a prominent player who was one of the best in football, and he was taking a shot at the Falcons after the game for how they played, because he wondered if they were any good because they had success running the football and continued to do that. Because that makes sense. As Max said after the game on the Falcons, Atlanta could be in trouble if it were forced into a drop-back passing game, because they hardly ever do it. Atlanta depends less on the passing than any team in the National Football League. I'm not trying to take any shots at the Falcons, but that could hurt them when they get into a situation when someone literally stops their running. Yeah, no disrespect to Atlanta, but they might not be that good of a team, because they only run the football, even though there was literally no reason for them to throw the football, because their ground game had 287 yards, and because they were averaging close to 6 yards every single time they ran it. Naturally, this man right here, head coach Norm Van Brocklin, got wind of these comments. And look, Van Brocklin might be one of the most interesting and craziest characters in the history of the sport. I've talked about Van Brocklin many times on this channel before, so if you want to learn more about him and his antics, including the time he literally tried to fight a reporter, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And all I'm saying is that usually, in these stories on Van Brocklin, he looks crazy. He looks like a complete idiot, and history was not kind to him. Not that the sport and the media was even kind to him at the time. If you're making Van Brocklin look like the good guy and the rational one, you messed up big time. Because afterwards, Van Brocklin was absolutely baffled by whatever the heck Max said. As he said, "I have no comment on what somebody else said," before proceeding to comment directly on what Max said. He said, "The drop back pass is an integral part of our offense. We drop back against the Bears, and we drop back against New England. We got something started, and the Rams didn't stop it, so we just kept it going. You don't need 2 maps to get someplace." And I love that saying, you don't need 2 maps to get someplace. It's like your friend in Madden that just runs the same play over and over again, but you can't stop it. There's no reason for him to stop running that play until you show that you can stop it, and until it's not effective. Van Brocklin realized that the Rams couldn't stop the run, so he did what anyone would do in that situation. He kept his winning formula and kept running the football. That doesn't make the Falcons a bad team. That doesn't make what the Falcons did dirty. It just makes them smart and logical. And why Mac and the Rams didn't seem to understand that, I'm not sure. But the advantage handily went to the Falcons here. The grand irony in all this is because these teams were both playing in the NFC West, they played a second time during that 1972 season. And the Rams won the game 20-7 the next time these teams met, with the Rams doing, quite literally, the exact same thing that the Falcons did in their first meeting. The Rams called 60 plays on offense in that game, and of the 60 plays, 49 of them were runs, and it worked to perfection because they picked up over 200 yards of offense just running the football. Why would they mess up a winning strategy? Why would they mess up a winning formula? They did in Game 2 exactly what the Falcons did in Game 1 by running the football over and over again. But you didn't see Max say anything about that because why would he? Bit hypocritical if you ask me. Still, even despite these crazy comments by Mac, not taking anything away from this man right here. Because this man, even despite those comments, one of the greatest offensive linemen in the history of the National Football League and one of the greatest players in Rams history as well. So I guess the grand moral of the story during this game right here is that sticking with a winning formula, despite what anyone else might say for some reason, is a perfectly viable and a perfectly reasonable strategy. If you have the ability to win games by doing the same thing over and over again, do it. Why not? There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, you'd be kind of crazy to switch up something for no reason that was working out for you. Who cares what the opposition thinks? Who cares if the opposition feels as though they're living in Groundhog Day? Because on this day in 1972, when it came to whatever the heck Hall of Fame guard Tom Mack thought, the Falcons thought that Mack was whack. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.